Dam construction is a pretty common trope in Japanese horror. Ryukishi is perhaps the most prominent writer who often uses this as a storytelling device, but there's a good reason you see it pop up so often. It's something that really did happen back in the day. Entire villages were wiped off the map because the government decided that particular location was perfect for a dam. And despite heavy protests, there was generally little people could do to stop their homes from being submerged. So this week, let's take a look at two villages in particular that no longer exist because they're currently sitting at the bottom of artificial lakes. Okawa Village. Surrounded by mountains reaching 1,000 meters high and bordering Ehime Prefecture in the north, Okawa Village now has a population of only roughly 350 people, making it the smallest municipality in Shikoku and the second smallest in all of Japan. On top of that, around half of its residents are over the age of 65. But how did this once thriving village end up in such a state? It was, of course, all thanks to a dam. Small villages opposing dam construction is a common trope in Japanese media, especially horror media, for a reason. It's something that actually happened, and possibly more often than you might think. Okawa Village, as we know it today, was officially established in 1889, shortly after the municipal system came into effect in Japan. The Yoshino River cuts right through the middle of the village, and after copper was discovered in the massively tall mountains surrounding the village, much of their economy revolved around mining and forestry. By the 1950s, around 4,000 people reportedly lived there, and the burgeoning town boomed with pachinko parlors, restaurants, theaters, and more. But sadly, this prosperity was not to last. First came news that the government planned to construct a dam that would submerge much of the village. This dam, which came to be known as Sameura Dam, was to be used for flood control, electricity production, irrigation, and also as a local water source. This area in particular was prone to both flooding and drought, which, as an Australian, I'm also incredibly familiar with. Fighting the government rarely ended in wins for the many villagers who tried to fight for their survival during this period, however. But that didn't stop them. Despite protests, construction on the dam began in 1963. It was a large-scale project, with the dam intended to have the largest storage capacity of any in Shikoku. Yet, even as the construction was ongoing, the villagers continued their fight. Naturally, they didn't want to lose their homes. Families had grown up here for generations, and for many, it was all they knew. But that wasn't the only reason. Despite being forced to give up their homes, there was also the small problem of property taxes. It was revealed these would be going to the nearby towns of Motoyama and Tosa, but not Okawa. It was in these towns that the actual water would be stored, despite the fact it was largely Okawa residents who were being forced out. Not only were they being torn from their homes, but they weren't even getting anything out of it. Nearby towns were instead. Residents kicked up their efforts to stop the construction. Around 600 signs were reportedly put up in the surrounding areas opposing the construction, and in an act of pure spite and rebellion, the residents even built a new village office, right in an area that was due to be submerged once the dam was completed. All of their efforts managed to drag construction out for over a decade, but in the end, they were still not able to stop it. The villagers were able to receive compensation, but that was it. In 1972, the nearby copper mine closed, and the following year, the Sameura Dam finished construction. Large areas of Okawa Village were flooded and disappeared from the maps forever. Well, mostly. That little act of rebellion building the village office in an area they knew would be flooded, ended up becoming a landmark of sorts. Whenever water levels get low in the dam, it pokes its head out and reminds everyone of the villagers who fought for their homes, for their families, for their birthplace, but in the end were unable to stop the inevitable. It stands strong as they once did, surprisingly weathering decades of being submerged quite well, by all accounts, and even today you can still see it there when the water levels drop. They may have lost the fight, but that Okawa Village office stands as a reminder that sometimes it's about making a statement. We were here, we fought, we lost, but we tried. Every year since then, however, the population in the village has dropped, and in the next few decades, we may see it drop to zero entirely. Depopulation is a very real problem in many small villages like this around the country. But, at least here, we can no doubt thank the dam for hurrying that process along. Tokuyama Village. Perhaps one of the most famous and definitely most well-documented villages to disappear off the face of the earth thanks to a dam. Tokuyama Village saw its population of 1,500 people forced to move after government research in the late 1950s decided their village was the perfect spot to build a dam. Not just any dam, but the largest dam in all of Japan. Dam. Of course, this wasn't a decision made without thought or care. This new dam was meant to help manage water levels in the Ibi River, provide water to both residents and industries in both Gifu and Aichi prefectures, and of course, mitigate flood damage from the numerous typhoons that tended to hit the area. Unfortunately, the perfect location for this dam also happened to coincide with, well, around 500 homes. Technically, Tokuyama Village wasn't even one village. Rather, there were 8 smaller settlements that made up the area, but they were closely connected and often took part in festivals and other such events together. And although government surveys began in the 1950s, it wasn't until 1973 that they officially put their plan for what would become Tokuyama Dam into action. Of course, just like the villages from Okawa, the Tokuyama villages also wouldn't go down without a fight. They started campaigns. They voiced their objections and general distrust of the government's plans. They made sure the dam construction was constantly in the news and fought tooth and nail against it. But, as one resident reportedly said, it's like an ant trying to defy a large river. Ultimately, there was nothing they could do in the face of the government. Although they were able to drag matters out when it came to compensation, relocation expenses, etc., in the end, the dam was going to be built whether they liked it or not. They were simply delaying matters, not halting them. Compensation was increased, and as it became more and more evident how the construction of the dam would actually save numerous villages that lay in flood zones, it became harder and harder to justify the fight. By 1987, after dragging their fight out for more than a decade, nearly 1,500 villages were moved, and Tokuyama Village was absorbed by what is now Ibi Town. For all intents and purposes, Tokuyama Village no longer existed. And yet, actual construction on the dam still wasn't able to start until the year 2000, and it finished 8 years later, meaning this dam is still rather new, despite surveys for its location being carried out nearly 70 years ago now. During this time, the remains of Tokuyama Village were well documented, with one resident in particular, Masuyama Tazuko, picking up a camera for the first time in her life at the age of 61 to document the end of the village. Reportedly, she did this so she could show them to her husband, who went missing during the war, should he ever return to find his village was now missing. She continued taking photos of the village right up until the end, and she published various photo books and held numerous exhibitions. But in a case of perhaps sad irony, she didn't even live to see the dam's completion. She passed away in 2006 at the age of 88, 2 years before construction finally ended. Her nephew also wrote a book set in Tokuyama Village that was turned into the 1983 movie Furusato. Over the years, several other books were written about the village, the villagers, and the construction of the dam. And in 2007, 1 year before it was completed, a documentary called The Village That Became Water was also released that followed the life of the last villager who remained in Tokuyama until the very end. Now, nothing exists of the former Tokuyama village. It has been completely submerged, although you can find numerous tools and other items from the village in several museums nearby. And of course, it remains in various photos, books, and films that were created before it was wiped off the face of the planet for good. If you've ever wondered why dam construction and local opposition play such large parts in numerous Japanese horror stories, it's because of the many cases like these that took place during the 1950s, 60s, and onward. But what did you guys think of this one? Are there any other villages and their stories that you'd like me to explore? Let me know in the comments below, and if you'd like to help support this channel so you can see more content like this, please consider hitting that join button down below as well. Every bit of support really helps. Thanks guys, and I'll see you again next time.